Hello and welcome to the Bucket Lister podcast. Join your host Keith Crockford along with special guests who have travelled the world, here to share stories of their adventures and plenty of inspo to add to your bucket list. Now, let's get into today's episode.
Hello everyone and welcome to this episode of the Bucket Lister podcast. Now, I've been wanting to record this podcast for some time, but I haven't actually been managed to get today's guest in to do it with me because either I've been on a trip or he's been on a trip. So, welcome Gareth, how are you?
Hello, I'm good, thank you.
Jolly good. Well, I mean, like I say, between the two of us, we tend to not actually get to see very much of each other because we're kind of always one of us is out of the country. And we've been asked to do this episode of the podcast for some time. And people have been asking us to give them more information on Mera Peak. And so today I've got Gareth along to go through the Mera Peak trek with us and just go through the trip in a little bit more detail, because I think it's not a very popular trip in terms of from our clients. If you look at how many people we take to EBC or Kilimanjaro, then Mera Peak, we're not taking very many at all. But I think it's probably because it's not really quite as well known, don't you think, Gareth?
Yeah, I think when I went earlier this year, I had 6 clients. And since we've ran it, I know myself, I've had lots of inquiries about it as we've done it. People have heard of it. It's, I think it's up and coming one. I think we're going to have a lot more people on it next couple of years.
Yeah, I think so, because I think it's almost that kind of, it's one of those what next trips, isn't it? Whereby people have done Everest Base Camp, they've done Kilimanjaro, and they want to take that next step and do something else. So they class Mera Peak then as the highest trekking peak in Nepal.
Yeah.
So give us a bit more information on what is a trekking peak.
So a trekking peak essentially is no technical skills or very little technical skills. So it's ideal for those of you that love walking in the UK mountains. Maybe you've been to higher altitudes like Kilimanjaro or Everest Base Camp. It's a summit in the Himalayas, but like I said, there's no technical climbing skills so much, or nothing that can't be taught in an afternoon or two. So mostly walking and a good introduction to high altitude mountains.
Yeah, I think that's it, isn't it? You know, Everest Base Camp, you know, people always sort of say, do I want to do Everest Base Camp? Because I'm kind of getting to the bottom of a mountain rather than getting to the top of one. Obviously, it is iconic to go to base camp, but for a lot of people kind of want to stand on top of something and say they've got to the top. And
I think getting to the summit of Mera Peak has got to be the best summit view I've ever had of anywhere in the world.
Wow.
It's amazing from the top.
Well, what were you seeing from the top?
So from the top, we had eight 8,000 metre mountains that we could see from the summits. We could see Everest, Lhotse. We could see at the far west, we could see Choyo. Far east, we could see Kachinjunga, which is right on the border to the east, as well as Makalu in the middle is another 8,000. We could also see Amadablam, Barunsi, both two iconic 7,000 metre peaks, or just shy of 7,000 metre Amadablam, but lots of well-known mountains that you could see from the top. It's just brilliant summit.
So obviously for some time we've been running we do the Everest Base Camp and Island Peak trip. And I know we've already talked in the next couple of weeks, we're going to get you back on the podcast to do another episode on Island Peak itself. Yeah. And I think the reason why that trip is so popular is because, like you say, people want to go to base camp, but at the same time, they want to summit a mountain at the same time. So Mera Peak then, I think, is a perfect, like you say, if you've done Everest Base Camp and you love Nepal and you want to go back and see something else, or if you've done Kili and you've got to, you want to get that next 6,000 metre peak in, I think that's where it fits in with people, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the big selling points from my point of view for for going on the Mera Peak trip, for going on the Mera Trail, is everyone knows about Everest Base Camp, everyone knows the trail, and it's a busy trail. But when you go to Mera Peak, it feels like you're in it's not untouched part of the Himalayas, but it's a lot more authentic feeling. You're much more out there with the locals, and you're not on a very touristy trail.
Yeah, I think Mera Peak in itself I would class it as like a proper expedition. It gives you that feel definitely. Of like, it's not just a trekking holiday. You actually feel you are on an exped. Yeah,
one of the points that adds to that is definitely the high camp on Mera Peak. You're camping on a glacier at 6,000 meters, 5,900 meters. You're camping on the summit of Kilimanjaro.
Yeah,
and again, the views from high camp, amazing as well. Brilliant. Makes it feel like a proper expedition.
So how high then is Mera Peak?
6,475. I'm taking 6.5.
And then it's so close.
Yeah.
And then in terms of Island Peak then, Island Peak is at
6,182, I think.
Yeah, but I always think Mera Peak is a trekking peak, and I would say Island Peak needs slightly more skills,
so,
I would say.
In terms of like the progressions, in terms of altitude, obviously Mera Peak's the higher one. But in terms of technicality, Mera Peak's a lot more straightforward. Island Peak's got sustained fixed ropes, I'd say, at the top. So you've got about 200 metres of hauling up a rope to get to the summit, which in itself is a brilliant way to summit a mountain. But Mera Peak's more challenging for the fact you've got to camp on the glacier. You've got to look after yourself at that altitude for a longer amount of time and just managing yourself in the cold.
And so let's walk through the trip then. So if you're on a Mera Peak trip, you are going to start the process off almost in exactly the same way as you would do going to Everest Base Camp. So you're going to take the flight to Lukla.
Yep, flying to Lukla.
And obviously that's changed for the foreseeable anyway. We're no longer able to fly from Kathmandu.
Yeah, so other than like early season or late season trekking, you're almost more than likely going to be flying from a little airstrip called Ramenchat, which is a couple hours drive outside of Kathmandu. This year for our Mera trip, obviously me and you are out there a handful of times a year. I kind of lent on our operators a bit, and I managed to get us on a flight from Kathmandu to Lukla. So you're out there the same time when you're flying from Ramenchat.
Yeah, we flew from Ramenchat.
Enjoying the drive, where we had a bit more of a leisurely journey up, I think.
Yeah, I think there were still those availabilities at the start of this season, wasn't it? But
it's really hard.
But from October
really
now,
limited,
it's properly limited, and I think everyone just has to come to the conclusion now that either unless you're going to pay for a helicopter and fly from Kathmandu, you are going to have to take the bus ride to Ramenchat.
And you see a lot in Nepal for the drive out. Really, you don't just see the trail in Kathmandu, you see everything in between it almost then as well. So you see a bit more of rural, lowland, Himalayan or Nepalese life.
Yeah, and I think, we changed our itineraries this year, and we've done the same for next year in terms of when we first had to do the Ramenchat flight, we were kind of leaving it 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning to get to Ramenchat for the first flight. You were then driving in the dark. You had to get up early, and then obviously, for an Everest Base Camp trek or a Gokyo trek, or not some bad for the Mera Peak, because you do spend that day in Lukla. But we've kind of changed ours now to make sure that we are driving to Ramenchat the night before, having a night in Ramenchat, and then getting up in the morning, which I think is definitely the better way of doing it, rather than.
Yeah. And my clients this autumn have appreciated the pool at Ramenchat now as well. So.
You were stuck there for a few more days than we would have liked. The weather this year was terrible at the start of the season, and and again, I think we were pretty fortunate to be able to fly out when we did fly out in the end, like our on-ground team worked really hard to make sure that
we were in October. I was out there with Jake. I think we were one of about 5 flights that flew in an 8-day period. Obviously, we were 2 flights because we were a bigger group, but not very many flights in a long period.
No, and not for the beginning. There was a lot of people stuck somewhere. And
then when we were on our way down, we were passing them all jammed together. So we had pretty empty trail, it felt like, for us.
On the way up.
Yeah.
And I think that's the other thing, and a consideration to make as well, isn't it? Because, they've made, the Nepalese Civil Aviation have made this decision to move all flights and fly from Ramchap.
Yeah.
But Ramchap isn't really set up at the minute for the amount of tourists that are going to be going through it.
Yeah, it's definitely growing.
It's growing, and they
are very fast,
and they are building accommodation. But this October, for those 8 days when no flights were going, I was hearing stories of other companies driving their clients back to Kathmandu, and then the following day they were doing another 5-hour drive back to Ramchap.
Yeah, be knackered, wouldn't you?
It was
fed up.
Yeah. And we were fortunate that we'd booked our accommodation, and our ground operators made sure that we had somewhere to stay until you actually managed to get going. So back to Mera Peak. We've digressed onto Lukla flights in Ramchap. But in terms of, so you'll fly to Lukla, but whereas on all of our other treks, we start the trek straight away as soon as we land. With Mera Peak, you actually have that day staying in Lukla to start with.
Yeah, so we fly into Lukla. First thing we do is just chill out, acclimatise, breathe in the thin air, wander around town, do a bit of shopping. It's great. It's quite a nice, leisurely start. I think it kind of settles everyone's nerves a bit.
And I think that's the other thing that I love about Mera Peak, is because Lukla has become this little town in itself now. There's coffee shops, there's bars, there's restaurants, there's snooker halls, there's barber shops, and then that kind of, if you're on the Everest Base Camp trek, that kind of continues as you go on the trek. But when you hit that, when you start from Lukla, you kind of go out of Lukla and hang a right as opposed to hanging a left.
Yeah.
And it changes instantly on the Mera Peak, doesn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, Mera Peak, like you said, turn right out of Lukla. I think we were the only ones in our tea house for the first 3 nights, maybe 4 nights. Didn't see another trekker. Proper out in the sticks. It felt like out in the wild. Felt remote. It was good.
And the facilities therefore aren't as good then, are they? As on an Everest Base Camp trek. They have not got the tourists going through for them to have.
Yeah, but that's what makes it feel like an expedition. I can remember first 2 nights definitely, rather than the cooks, the tea house owners cooking on gas burners, they were cooking on a log fire. Like I said, there was 6 clients and myself. We'd have a different meal ordered off the menu each, and they'd bring all 7 meals out at exactly the same time, perfectly well done. Kind of mind-blowing, really, if I imagine trying to do the same myself.
Yeah. Well, you struggle with microwave meals, Gareth, so cooking 7 meals on an open fire. So just give us a walkthrough then of the trip itself. So just talk through, getting up to high camp, what that actually entails.
So, like I said, we have an acclimatisation day in Lukla, and then the first 2 nights after that, they're really short days. You're climbing quite considerable amounts. You're still keeping it safe, but you're going up, you're staying somewhere all afternoon just to acclimatise, sucking in the thinner air, chilling out, getting acclimatised. And then on the 3rd day, I think it is, you go over a pass at just over 4,000 metres called the Zatrala Pass, which is pretty, when we did it, it's pretty airy. We'd had a dump of snow the day before, so we had to snow down to 3,000 metres. Load of cloud in on this high mountain pass. We couldn't see very far. Kind of felt like we were trekking into Mordor. And then we finally descend in the afternoon on the 3rd day down into a place called Chetrabuk, which is kind of your first EBC-esque village. Like there's actually multiple tea houses. It's not just a tea house on the mountainside. You've got a proper tea house, a toilet inside rather than just an outhouse, and I guess proper rooms, proper roof, bit more civilized. From there, you're in the you're kind of in the Mera Valley, so you kind of start trekking up, following the river from there. You stop at a place called Kote, and then up to, on day 5 of the 5 or 6 of the trek, up to a place called Tanang. Tanang, we stay there for 2 nights. We're having a acclimatization day there. And a really nice acclimatization walk from there. We went up, I think we went to 5,000 meters on the acclimatization day, just up this big ridge. Nice view of Mera Peak from there. You can kind of look up the valley, see the southern face of Mera Peak. So you climb Mera Peak from the north, so you're kind of looking at the southern side of it before you traverse or climb around or trek around Mera.
So you are gaining altitude then a lot quicker on a Mera Peak trek than you would on a
you do up
EBC trek.
to the Zatrala Pass is quick, but again, like the days are shorter, so you got all afternoon to chill out and acclimatise. Once you've gone over the Zatrala Pass, you descend a long way. So Chetrabuk, like I said, is back down at like 3.5. So you go over 4,000 meters, you go back down. Kote is again 3.5, I think 3.8, 3.5, and Tanang's 4.3. So you do go high quickly at the beginning of the trek, but then you drop back down and you kind of get that slow acclimatization again. So you go up, which is really good for the acclimatization, then you descend so you can, your body can recover from the acclimatization and you can kind of slowly build it up from there again. I thought it worked really well. And we also had 2 days in Kari, which is 5,000, between 5 and 5.1, I think, Kari. So we had 2 days there to acclimatise as well. And Kari is like your last village before you head up to base camp and then on up to high camp. So we had 2 days there, and we did 2 days rope practice, technical skills practice.
Are you tented or are you in a tea house at base camp?
Base camp's the first night in a tent. Kari, up to Kari, everything's in a tea house of some degree. The first couple are a bit more debatable about, they've got like plastic sheet roofs, but they're brick walls. And then you're into like typical tea houses of the UBC trail, again, till base camp. Base camp's in a tent, so it's high camp.
And in terms of the equipment then that you need for Mera Peak compared to, say, a Kilimanjaro or an EBC trek, what extra stuff is there that you're really going to need to have in your bag?
So I'll start with the easy bit. You're walking on a glacier, so you're walking on ice for 2 days or so. So you need appropriate footwear to go to 6,500 meters that will take a crampon. You need the crampons that will match the boot. Not like a technical one, just a standard mountaineering crampon.
Trekking crampon as opposed to
a... you'd also need an ice axe for walking on the glacier and glacier goggles or glacier sunglasses of some degree that will protect your eyes.
Yeah, if they're pretty bright when it's bouncing off there.
Yeah. So that's like the technical gear, I guess, that you'll need.
In terms of the boots, what advice would you give on boots in terms of, yes, it's a 6,500 meter summit. It is going to be colder, but did you go full plastic or did you go in between, or where were you with it?
So I wore a pair of La Sportiva Nepals, which is like the classic. They're yellow, like full season winter mountaineering boot. They're definitely at the cold end of the spectrum, I'd say. You know, I'm always really cold. I was really cold in my feet, but I had clients that had like the next step up from that, and they were plenty warm. So like if you're a warm person, they'd probably be all right. But I'm a little bit of a chilly person, bit of a wuss.
So would you advise to go full plastic then for that? Or do you think actually like a pair of Nepal Evos are at that sort of level?
I'd probably advise going a little bit warmer. You're spending all that money to go out there. Having cold feet would be a silly reason to have to turn back and not go up. If all the conditions are favourable and you're just cold, seems a bit daft.
Did you have anyone hiring kit out there, or did everyone take all their stuff with them?
No, yeah, we had a couple of guys that hired kit off of ourselves. I took out a load of climbing kit, and some of the guys hired boots. We hired them in Kathmandu, just because we have the ability in Kathmandu to go around, shop around a bit, compare prices, compare quality, if you like. Once you've flown up to Lukla, people want to hire once they've flown up to Lukla because of that weight limit.
Difference, yeah.
But I think I would advise everyone to get their boots in Kathmandu so you know what you've got before you get up there and you're committed and can't find what you want.
Just on that one, let's just have a little chat, because we always have, before any trip, the people commenting, I'm talking about EBC now.
Yeah.
How the hell they're going to get all of their stuff in under 15 kilos on an EBC trek to get onto the flight to Lukla. Now, obviously, if you're doing Island Peak or Mera Peak, like, you are carrying considerable amount more gear in terms of what was, how do you manage to pack yours into 15 kilos when you are needing extra?
I put my heavy boots on.
Yeah.
I wear my heavy down jacket. I put what I can in my pockets. And I think there's a little bit of, I always think on the EBC trek, if you give someone a 50-litre rucksack, they'll fill a 50-litre rucksack. If you give them a 20-litre rucksack, they'll fill a 20-litre rucksack. Exactly the same. Like, if you give someone a weight limit, they'll always struggle to get under it, but they'll always find a way to get under it. I think people, if we reduce the weight limit, people would still get under it. I think
it's like when you have a 25 kilo weight limit, your bag always comes in at 24 kilos, and you're like, well, actually, I'll just take that extra jumper. I'll just take those just in case.
You fill what you're allocated. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
You also get the ability to, quite often, kit's available from Lukla and above. So I've had people buying bits up there. Not that I'd particularly recommend that. It's quite pricey, but.
And I think the other thing as well is things like with boots, for example, like everyone's feet are a different shape, different width. Yeah. Like every boot fits differently. Like we've both worn Sportiva for years, and they do fit our feet well, and that's what you want. But you might find that Scarpa are too narrow or Scarpa are too wide for your feet. When you go out in higher kit, you're not going to have the opportunity to have 7 different brands of boots there to make sure. And if you're going to be walking them on a mountain for the next 2-3 days,
it's probably the only bit of kit that you don't want to have to replace or like not to fit well. If you've got a jacket that doesn't really fit well, you can make do. If you've got pair of gloves, pair of mitts, whatever that doesn't fit well, you make do. But boots, I think, being on your foot, being a trek, like
the one thing that's going to hurt is going to be your feet.
Yeah, exactly. Like you can make do with everything else.
Yeah,
but your boots are.
And I suppose that the key thing with that is unless you are a keen mountaineer, and you're then going to go to the next stage and the next stage. Like, a pair of plastic boots are not cheap. No. You're only going to wear them like so many times in a year. Even if you are a pretty keen mountaineer, it's not something that you're going to use in the UK very often unless you're going Scottish winter.
Yeah.
So I understand why people are cautious about going and buying.
Yeah.
A pair, but I mean there is a pretty good second-hand market for them, isn't it? Like you could come back if you bought a pair that fitted you perfectly. You could come back and say worn for 4 days and sell them on Outdoor Gear Exchange on Facebook and probably not lose very much money on them either.
Yeah, and there's always people in the exact position of many of us that want want the boots, they want the right kit, but they don't want to spend the full price because they're only going to wear them for the 4 days as well. So
yeah, exactly. Okay, then. So we've got to base camp. Talk us through then the process of summiting Mera Peak from base camp.
So base camp is located, I think it's 5'2". It's right on the edge of the glacier. You wake up in the morning at base camp, you have breakfast in your tent. It's freezing cold because the sun's not on it straight away. You walk a couple 100 meters, 500 meters, and you're at crampon point, you're putting your crampons on. So you put your crampons on there, and you climb up from there to the Mera. So anyone going towards Barunsi or Makalu, they'll all go up and over that bit as well into the next valley. Because you're on a glacier, you actually get roped up into smaller teams because when we were out there, it was what you call a wet glacier. So the glacier is covered in a layer of snow. You can't see the crevasses. We know roughly where they are from like the shape of the glacier and where they're going to form, but we rope together into smaller teams to have that like extra security. If one of you slips in a little bit, the rest of the team's there to kind of play tug of war and catch you from going in. So you will be roped up. We were in 2 teams of, I think we were in like a 4 and a 5 with Nepali Sherpa on each rope. From Mera, it's probably about another 2 hours climb up to base camp, to high camp, sorry. High camp's hidden just behind this big rock spire in the middle of the glacier. So it's pretty cool place. You go up, you can see this big bit of rock and you poke around the other side of it to try and get some shelter in this little dip out of the snow. High camp's really small, really cramped, lots of tents. And there's like a bit of a buzz of everything. Like everyone's going up, so there's a bit of a buzz around camp. It's quite cool. And you'll get in your tent. Probably not going to get out. It's pretty cold there. Not much sun. Early night, lots of dial bat in the tents. And then I think we started on our summit push about 2 a.m. So head torches, roped up again. We summited about 8 a.m. It's about a 6-hour push to the top. And there's a really small, which is the nice part about Mera Peak, that progression from Kili to Island Peak, I guess, is even though it's higher, you've only got one really short section of fixed rope. You probably walk up it. The fixed line's only there because of the it's a bit of a drop to one side into the valley, so it's just there to safeguard you a little bit onto quite a small summit, like penalty box in a football sized.
Right.
Summit, little plateau with brilliant views.
How many other people were then at high camp going up to summit the same sort of time as you then? If you think about all the other treks we do and how many people are summiting in a day, how did that compare with Mera Peak?
I think there was 40 odd climbers. That's like Western clients. When we were up there, I think I remember being told. And there's a Sherpa, a Nepalese Sherpa per every 5 or so on Mera Peak. We had the summit to ourselves when we got up there. We kind of timed it quite well, got up there, had the summit to ourselves. Didn't feel very busy, kind of in the dark you can see all the head torches below you, above you, but it wasn't a very busy mountain.
Nothing like a night on Kilimanjaro then.
No. Kili, where you can't tell who's in your group, who's in the team overtaking you. No, it's quiet. I'd say quiet mountain.
And what would you say the temperatures were that you were having to endure when you were there?
Minus 26 was what was on the forecast with wind chill on summit night. I think it's one of the coldest I've ever been. I climbed Everest with Bucket List Company a few years ago. It was like as cold as that. It was cold.
And in terms of like what did you have on kit wise to kind of?
So I've got a bit. I'll start against my skin. I had a pair of thermal trousers and a lightweight like fleece base layer on my top. I had a midweight fleece on my top and then a big heavy down jacket. I had a pair of down trousers, which you can get in Kathmandu, like for 30 quid on my legs, and a pair of waterproof over trousers over the top. Big pair of thick mountaineering socks and my, like I said, my big yellow boots. I had a pair of heavy mitts on, quite warm mitts, get quite cold hands, and a beanie, and all my hoods up, all zipped up.
Toasty.
Yeah, in my happy place, I call it.
And in terms of, were you cold as you were walking, or was it like when you were stopping that you sort of felt getting cold?
I can remember being all right in most of my body. I was pretty wrapped up. It was a bit of a biting wind just as we were starting to get near the summit. But what was cold was, I can remember we were, it's pretty even angled slope for quite a lot of it. So we were probably walking up what felt like the same slope for about 2.5, 3 hours. I can remember like being at the front of my rope and front pointing in, so kicking my toes into the snow, just because it was a bit of powder snow. My toes were getting really cold from kicking them under the snow every step. Talking to the people behind me, they didn't have the same problems. I kicked the steps in.
Because you were kicking the steps?
Yeah, it was only because I was the front of my rope kicking the steps in that I was getting really cold toes. But the whole group, we were really well prepared. We were all warm, really. It was a very cold night, but we were very warm. We had all the right kit, so.
And the whole trip itself is quite a long trip, isn't it? Because is it 20, 21 days in total from UK back to UK? 21,
maybe a 22nd with flight.
Overnight flight on the way back. And in terms of the trek itself, 15?
I think it was,
15 days, isn't it?
15, it might have been 17. 15, 17.
16, yeah. But I think in terms of, I think you fly back to Lukla on day 17 of the trip, but obviously you've already been in Kilimanjaro, in Kathmandu for a couple of days as well, haven't you? So, 15-ish days trekking compared to kind of your normal 12-day
base camp
trek or a 6 to 9 day Kilimanjaro trek. It does kind of take you to that next level of multi-day trekking trips, isn't it?
Yeah, you got to look after yourself properly. You can't. I think like Kili trip, really, you can get away with not being perfectly prepared because of the shorter duration of it. But especially on the Mera Trail, there's not so many places like there is on the base camp trek that you can get stuff if you need it. You're a bit more. You have to be more prepared for it. You can't.
But I think as well, like on a Kili trip, like, you could have a dodgy couple of days and you've got enough in reserve in your body to see you through it, haven't you? You have not got that option on a trip like this. Like, you have got to look after yourself properly for...
And if you remember, I said about going over that Zatrala Pass on the third day on the way out. You got to come over that on the last day. So your last day after summiting, I think you have 2 really long days back down the trail, and then the last thing you got to do to get back to Lukla is go from, I think it's 3.5, Zatrala's 4.1, 4.2, back down to 2.7. It's a pretty epic day. We had quite low snow again on it, so we were like sliding down bits of it. It was quite fun.
And then back to Lukla. Bit of a party.
Of course. Went to the Waves Bar.
Into our favourite bar in Lukla.
Yeah. We had a couple of birthdays on that trip, so we had a couple of birthday cakes, a celebration cake as well. And the team I had out there this spring were really, really cool, and they kind of recognised the effort the crew had put in to get us there. Obviously, I said really low snow getting over that pass. The porters still went over it with our bags on, so they ended up taking them out for a night out in Lukla as well, and they really appreciated that. Really bonded the whole team, from porters to the guides and assistant guides and the clients, all together out having a good time. But
you do spend a long time together, don't you? You are together. You get to know people pretty well on a trip of that length.
Yeah, and the same guys carrying your bag every day. So I had a guy called Portab carried my bag on that trip, who I bumped into in Namche last month. Came over, had a big chat with me. Hello, how are you?
But that's just what happens doing these trips, isn't it? It is so lovely to like every time we go back, it's just, you could be walking up and there's like a group walking down and suddenly someone calls your name out and that you haven't seen them. I mean, I had that in April this year, and it was people who I hadn't seen for 2-3 years going back before the pandemic. Like, you haven't seen these people for a long time, but they still remember.
They remember you. They remember where they went with you. They remember your name.
Yeah.
It's amazing, really, isn't it?
And it's even better when they're still wearing their bucket list company buff or something. That makes it even better for us when they're still doing that. So what advice then, Gareth, would you give to somebody who has done Kili, done Everest Base Camp, is thinking of the next step? What advice would you give to them with regards to Mera Peak?
I would advise them, I think, going to Scotland and maybe doing like a winter skills course. Not so much for any technical skills, but Scotland's a really harsh environment in the winter, and as much as there's a 4,000 metre difference between them, it does prepare you, just because it's that tough environment, kind of builds a bit of resilience, gets you ready for being out there. Just going out day after day as well, and just getting that.
That's the issue, isn't it?
Getting the time in your legs, if you like.
And who would you say is an ideal client for like a Mera Peak trek?
If you've been up Kili, I think it's completely achievable to do Mera Peak next. Kili's best part, 6,000 metres.
And quick.
And quick, yeah, exactly. Really quick ascent. Mera Peak's 500 metres higher, which is like a nice next interval to step up to, but also takes you to, like I said, a remote part of the Himalayas compared to base camp, where you get to meet some great people, have a great time, great views.
Yeah, I think that's just hit the nail on the head. I think if you are looking for that expedition style trip, then Mera Peak is definitely one that you should have a look at.
Yeah.
Well, Gareth, it's been amazing chatting to you. We will put links in the show notes to our Mera Peak trip, so you can have a look at that. And if you do have any questions on Mera Peak, or you want to discuss it, then please just give the office a call or send us an email, and either Gareth or I will be happy to have a chat with you individually or reply to your email. That's not a problem at all. But thanks ever so much for listening today. We hope you found this episode really interesting. And like I say, I'll be back in a couple of weeks' time when I can tie Gareth down again to do the same sort of episode on Island Peak as well, because quite a lot of people ask us, what's the differences between Mera Peak and Island Peak? And we could have put it all in one episode, but we've managed to ramble on for 40 minutes on one. So I think if we tried talking about both of them, it would have been a mammoth episode. So we'll come back and do that one in a few weeks' time. So thanks, Gareth, again. Thanks for listening.
Cheers.
And we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Bucket Lister podcast. Be sure to click follow to be alerted for next week's episode. For more travel inspiration, check us out at www.thebucketlistcompany.co.uk or follow us on socials. See you next time.